Epic Bestia.
Hiya, Manic Bestia here. This year I decided to replay my favourite childhood platformer, Rayman 2. This game clearly had a huge influence on me. Could you tell? So I wanted to find out if it held up or not. It was my first time beating the game since I was a child, so I also wanted to find out why this game left such an impression on me, instead of all the other 3D platformers I played. So let's have a look. Lead director Michel Ancel is the mastermind behind this and the first Rayman game. And if you couldn't tell from the striped shirt, he is a very French man. The team behind Rayman 2 consisted of about 80 people and had 3 times the budget of the first game thanks to its success. The engine was created for one of Michel's strangely similar games, Tonic Trouble, but after it was delayed, both games ended up releasing in the same year. With how similar they both look, it almost feels like Tonic Trouble was a tech demo for Rayman 2, which got fully developed for some reason. NitroRad made a whole video about this game if you're interested. For clarification, I played the Dreamcast version for this video, because that's the one I grew up with and the version that I've played the most. The Nintendo 64, PlayStation and CD-ROM versions are all slightly different, but don't even worry about it. The changes are nearly inconsequential. That still doesn't stop people from arguing over which version is the best and worst though. From what I've seen, it's completely superficial. There's no wrong version of Rayman 2. Although I will mention the Rayman Revolution port for the PS2, because it overhauls the game more than any other version, and that could honestly be its own video entirely. I'll also mention the PlayStation versions include voice acting, which I personally think takes away from the overall mood of the game. But if you like the voice acting, then hey, more power to you. It's okay to be wrong, I do it all the time. Hey, the preamble's over by the way. Are you even listening? No? Good. Let's begin. For this segment, I'll just assume you're familiar with all the big Nintendo games because they've pretty much been carrying the entire game industry on their back ever since they started, so I don't blame you. I mean, why would you ever play Rayman 2 when you have Banjo-Kazooie or Mario 64? I think it simply comes down to structure and intent. Rayman 2 is based on relatively short level-to-level progression with great but simplistic platforming. In contrast, Mario 64 and Banjo-Kazooie have fewer, larger levels and hub worlds, with more complex movement mechanics where you're free to get lost and bash your head against a wall for hours trying to do the bitch-ass top-top choir. Fuck these guys! Every level in Rayman 2 is unique, but it never feels like any of them are disconnected from the overall world. As if you're really adventuring through a whole connected landscape filled with ancient temples, fairy villages, or wrecked ships left behind by the evil robo-pirates, polluting the Glade of Dreams. I much prefer this level structure, and I find it difficult to think of a stage which I completely dislike or would rather skip whenever I play the game. Except for this one. Fuck this one. Funnily enough, I think a closer comparison to Rayman 2 would be the Donkey Kong Country games, rather than its 3D platformer companions. Or, you know, Rayman 1. I heard that's pretty similar. Rayman 2 and DKC both have a simple A to B level structure, sometimes going back for mini-games or challenges. Both games also have tight and responsive platforming mechanics, allowing the level designers to come up with new gimmicks for each stage. Donkey Kong Country may be more famous for its graphics, which push the boundaries of the Super Nintendo, but I certainly wouldn't discount Rayman 2 for its beautifully hand-painted and magical world. Every polygon has a purpose, with careful use of cutouts and background layers creating a deeply immersive atmosphere at every moment. And that's why I love this style of platformer more than any other. From the largest spaceships to the smallest butterflies, every ounce of the presentation perfectly creates this melancholic and magical atmosphere. That's probably why I think it's more comparable to Donkey Kong Country than Rayman 1. It's all about the vibes. Speaking of, while I haven't beaten Rayman 1, it scares me. The main 4 games that I have played, Rayman 2, 3, Origins and Legends, all have the same design philosophy. Run, jump, climb, punch and swim your way through whimsical art pieces of magic and mischief. And they all emphasise different aspects of each other. Rayman 2 is all about platforming and shooting, Rayman 3 is more focused on combat, Rayman Origins goes back to the second dimension but now you can run around and smash shit, and Rayman Legends is also about smashing shit, now with an even fresher coat of paint. If anything can compare or even exceed the standards that the Donkey Kong Country games have set, it would be Rayman Legends. I can easily say it's a near perfect video game that everyone should play. With my main point here being games like these don't sacrifice graphics for gameplay or vice versa. They're a near perfect balance of form and function. Overall, Rayman games are more focused on fast-paced platforming and environmental storytelling, instead of having you waltz around a large map trying to find quests. Don't get me wrong though, I do love that structure too when it's done right, but usually there's some sort of snag that prevents me from loving it. Whether it be terrible difficulty scaling, awkward underwater controls, or slippery surfaces that take away all of your control. I fucking hate these in games, nobody likes these, stop! Hold on, let's get back to Rayman 2 though. For a 3D platformer in the 90s, it may seem basic at first, but I think there's actually a lot of nuance to be found once you get your dirty little claws on the controls. First of all, you're able to easily fondle the analog stick to move around, without sliding off ledges or bouncing off a wall by touching it 2 degrees from the correct angle. You can instantly stop yourself when moving and jump out of any state you're in, which just feels brilliant. And while you're in the air, you can still control your movement because you aren't just locked to the momentum of your jump. All this gives you the freedom to seamlessly parkour around obstacles because it never feels like the mechanics are fighting over each other, allowing you to correct slight mistakes in your life, rather than pressing a button and just letting Jesus take the wheel straight into an endless fucking hole. One mechanic I always take for granted is the fact you can simply jump while climbing. This was the first 3D platformer I played, so when I went from this to Mario 64, Banjo-Kazooie and Ocarina of Time, I just found it so frustrating that the ladder climbing is just reduced to slowly make your way upwards. Rayman 2 has all these platforms you can climb around. You can climb on ceilings, avoid obstacles, move in 360 degrees because this is a 3D platformer after all, and there aren't any dumbass ladders or poles here. Climbing is usually conducted through large vines and rigging, which feels so much better to jump and cling onto, like a giant obstacle course or playground. Next, there's the ledge grab. I know, riveting stuff. NitroRad absolutely creamed himself over this in his review, and you know what? He's right. The fact some games have this really slow ledge climbing animation should just straight up be a crime. Again, this is another way you control the state Rayman is in, exactly how you would expect to. There aren't any slow in-between animations you need to wait for before your next move. It's perfectly snappy and responsive. A common trick games like to use and abuse is the hover or glide mechanic. Rayman 2 takes this core character concept established in the first game and translates it perfectly into 3D. And since the game emphasizes vertical platforming so much, the hover mechanic doesn't just trivialize horizontal jumping segments like you may expect. The developers very cleverly spaced each gap, so even when you are using the hover mechanic, you have just enough space to make it. Then there's Banjo-Kazooie, which has a much more risky slow fall that doesn't even work once you reach terminal velocity. Let's see, which other games have a slow fall mechanic? No, I'm not talking about that one. Many platformers can end up being frustrating with pinpoint precision jumping puzzles, but Rayman 2 is a lot more casual in that aspect. Whenever I die or miss a ledge, it always feels like it's my own fault. The difficulty of platforming usually comes from other obstacles like falling barrels, piranhas, ghosts, and robo-pirates blasting a cap in your ass.
Wesh les mecs! Aujourd'hui, je vais prendre un Rayman. C'est parti! Va chier!
Speaking of robot space pirates, let's talk about combat. Being an action platformer, Rayman 2 combines excellent movement with simple but engaging long-range attacks. Rayman's offensive moveset is centered around shooting magic Hadouken orbs at enemies, which he can also use for switches and purple lums to swing on. A lock-on mechanic lets you strafe and jump to avoid lasers, guns, and bombs. You can charge your orb to make it ricochet off walls and deal extra damage, but this comes at the risk of you standing still and becoming vulnerable. And yeah, that's pretty much it. In a vacuum, the combat seems simple, but I think the scenarios make up for that a bit, even if some feel too easy. Dodging from a distance, charging at the exact right moment, close quarters, circuit skirmishes. The robo-pirates are always coming up with new tricks to keep you on your toes. In the original game, there's only a few power-ups. The power to swing on purple lums, and the charge shot. Besides those, the only thing you can really level up permanently is your health bar, for winning these shitty button-mashing minigames after clearing a level. These fucking minigames are the worst part of the game, and your reward for beating them are just 3 golden fists to one-shot enemies. Thank Nix you don't need to beat any of these pricks to get 100% completion. The extra health ain't worth it, and it just makes the game way too easy anyway. Rayman's few power-ups don't feel like an upgrade in the same way a Metroidvania does them. It's mostly a linear game, so you'll never need to use these powers to go back for a previously unobtainable item, which I think was a bit of a missed opportunity. My favourite power is the one you have for the whole game, which allows anything Rayman throws to magnetically attract to exactly what you're aiming for, without perfect accuracy. It's a small detail, but I can't imagine living without it now. It makes the gameplay flow really well. So even if Rayman doesn't change much, the designers were always able to switch up the gameplay in every level, keeping things extra fresh. You've got jumping segments, moving platforms, sliding segments, riding on a bomb with legs, flying on a bomb with legs, water skiing, underwater, lava surfing, lava flying, now you're a pirate ship, enemy encounters, boss fights, oh my god! They knew exactly what made 3D platformers fun, and what didn't. You won't find any on-rails turret segments here. Instead, you'll be strapped to a chair on a monorail going max speed, spinning around, getting motion sickness, just trying to collect that one last lum. Oh yeah, I haven't explained lums yet. Let me just consult the law book real quick. Actually, fuck that, don't even worry about it. Lums are just the collectibles you need to unlock levels. So now let's talk level design. Rayman 2 remains in my head as one of the first games I was obsessed with as a child, and one of the only games I actually beat. I was lucky enough to have a lot of choice when I was young, so I didn't have hours of time to sink into one game a year. Strangely enough, the only games I remember actually beating, as in getting to the credits, were a bunch of the LEGO games and Rayman 2. The simplicity of its short level structure and controls would have really helped with this, because I've never had much patience. Although saying that, I must have really struggled with the final boss as a kid, because the music has been stuck in the back of my subconscious my entire life. The thing with Rayman 2 is, if you aren't going for 100%, then it's no big deal. But if you are going for 100%, then there's some mysterious anomalies I need to warn you about first. If you're one of those Ocarina of Time masochists with infinite free time who enjoys obtuse bullshit puzzles, then feel free to skip this bit to avoid some minor spoilers. First of all, at pretty much the beginning of the game, in level 2, the Fairy Glade, you come across one of the teensy cages you need to break open to get 100% inside a parrot building to the left. So what did I do? I searched for ages going in and out of the level trying to find some back entrance or way to break into this room to no avail. In the end, I had to give up and just move on. As I progressed, I would keep going back to level 2 trying to get the cage, but still, it was impossible. So how do you get this cage? It's obtained through an optional hidden tunnel in level 12, the Echoing Caves. What?! This is the only part of the game which does this, and it really fucked with me because up until now I could 100% every level without trouble, tonic trouble. So I just felt like a complete retard for the longest time because whenever I play games, I like to figure out everything on my own without using guides. Skill issue? Brain tumour? Perhaps. The second jape this game pulls out of its ass has gotten me twice now, and it's in the Sanctuary of Stone and Fire. In this level you make use of giant plums which are lava-proof somehow, and use Rayman's shots to propel yourself backwards. Soon enough you'll encounter the sign. Which way do you go? One path leads to a black shadowy door which looks like a loading zone you can't come back from. So it can't be that way, right? Wrong! This is an entirely optional temple you can end up skipping by accident, thus losing out on 3 whole cages. Hopefully you make the correct arbitrary 50-50 decision, Rayman, or dozens will die. And no, you can't just go back, collect the lums and leave. You need to beat the level to get the lums. Besides those 2 oddities, the rest of the game is pretty straightforward. At each corner you'll also be rewarded with some short and adorably charming cutscenes, with some funny characters to help motivate you to save these helpless goobs. The levels are loosely structured around collecting the 4 all-powerful Palocus masks which do nothing. In Rayman Revolution they're given some uses, but in the original game they're just checkpoints to show progress. Obtaining said masks requires you to beat end-level bosses of wildly varying difficulty. Axel literally takes 1 icicle to the head and oofs. The game's difficulty can feel comically trivial at these points. I guess they're treated more as story moments than full-on boss fights, which is disappointing honestly after all that build-up. The mid-bosses are sometimes more fun than the main ones, like the Clark fight and the Jano chase. Still, I'd rather a boss fight be too easy than too frustrating. In the end, they don't really bring down the experience, they more so just don't add much to the game overall. In Revolution, there were extra bosses added like the Biddy tank to solve this issue though. One thing I really appreciate about the level design in this game is how every platforming platforming segment feels diegetic and connected with the rest of the world. I do love platformers, but I don't personally identify with ones which focus on platforming itself rather than what those platforms actually are. Why is this platform here? What are the obstacles' purpose thematically? If it's just a random floating platform spinning around, then it just feels kind of weak. Like, yeah, there's a cube of bricks up there for some reason, but why? Did Bowser do the ground pound, make a big sound and rupture the earth, causing chunks to fly everywhere? No, this is just normal apparently. People are just so used to Mario's bullshit, and that's why nobody ever talks about the atmosphere of Mario games, because there is none. It's a circus! Oh shit!
This opinion was deemed too spicy and has been detained.
Rayman? More like... Game on! Jump across.
I've gone much too long without mentioning the soundtrack. It seriously deserves more love. Yes, nostalgia does play a strong part in this, but something about this soundtrack has kept me coming back year after year, and I can't really say the same for any other game I played as a kid. In the original N64 release, Eric Chevalier had to use a sound font with a few unique sample channels. This was limiting, of course, but the compositions were still great, with all the little motifs sprinkled throughout, creating a very addictive and memorable score. But in the CD-ROM, PS1 and Dreamcast versions, you get the fully realised CD quality soundtrack that was intended. Using classic 90s samples and effects, I think the definitive soundtrack has a much more hard-hitting and immersive atmosphere. You got that fucking... Then Mike Wazowski appears and he's all like... Then we get that funky shit like... Holy shit, Razorbeard just broke into my house and started breakdancing! I always remember the story of Rayman 2 being the darkest. Rayman 3 may have a lot of creepy villain designs, but the comedic writing and voice acting definitely takes away from the atmosphere, and is really hard to ignore. In Rayman 2, however, there initially wasn't voice acting, and the comedic moments are few and far between. The only spoken words are when the game immediately opens up with this super dramatic monologue, showing the pirate slave ship with Rayman and Glowbox captured together. It has a seriously sinister tone, and the few comedic moments aren't completely overt like in Rayman 3. Like you'll bounce off a mushroom and it will make a funny boing sound effect, Rayman does a silly little Fortnite dance to open a portal, and the characters you meet range from Blue Frog Obelix to a bunch of weird all-powerful alien frog wizards. It's so charming and never gets annoying or in your face like the fucking rabbits! The atmospheric world of Rayman 2 evokes the dark magic and fantasy of ancient forests, fairies, stars, moons, spirals, and mystery. All this contrasted perfectly with the Robo-Pirates and their flying space galleons beaming oppressive spotlights down into the jungle. I've always loved this combination of Renaissance galleons and industrial machinery, and Razorbeard's giant-ass space station prison ship is such a badass final stage for the game that stuck with me thanks to its magnitude. Even if the developers were limited in terms of polygons and textures, they used this to their advantage when designing the pirate hideouts to add this fantastically intricate and crooked look to the architecture. Even when it comes to the hand-painted textures, every line is masterfully warped and asymmetrical, adding to this surreal fantasy look. Rayman 2 fits into that category of games which have a very cohesive and intentional art style with all of its assets, similar to Medieval, where immersion is the focus. The art directors specifically used pentagonal shapes all over the place, and once you notice it, you start to see them everywhere. From kegs and tunnels to Rayman's fucking shoe, the use of pentagons add to this crooked and whimsical art style, similar to how Banjo-Kazooie would frequently use hexagons for its level architecture as a reference to the honeycombs. I also talked about this in my 90s graphics video if you want to waste more of your time watching this garbage. There's currently a modern remaster of Rayman 2 being developed by New Dawn Games called Rayman Redreamed. I'm really excited to see what they're going to make, as I assume they're taking notes from what Rayman Revolution did. But I also really don't want to do the dickhead YouTuber thing and say that I prefer the original graphics of Rayman 2 because of my nostalgia, and any sort of remake would be soulless. Even so, there's a lot to appreciate and learn from early 3D games, and I think the original ports give you a unique experience just in terms of atmosphere. For a game that I love for its somber, mystical and immersive world, I think it's an important aspect to consider when I recommend it to people. Still, I don't want to put you off the Redreamed project because it looks really cool in its own way, and I'm sure it's going to introduce many more fans to this beloved game which has stood the test of time. And more importantly, the test of my patience with old video games. There's an underlying level of appreciation I have with the original graphics of the game, knowing the limitations the developers would have been working with. So when you see the use of vertex shading, backgrounds, layering, blend shapes, etc., it's just really cool to see what they were capable of. And this is a very specific feeling I don't think you'd get from the modern graphics. Again though, Rayman Revolution is still a great game that gives you a more expansive version of the original experience, and if this is your best option, then don't let the snobs online deter you from playing it.
Don't listen to me, I don't know shit. Ignore what everybody says on the internet and come to your own conclusions, you fucking sheep. Ow! Oh.
Finally, I just want to reiterate that all of this is just my very biased and unnecessarily provocative opinion. I don't fuck with the Blue Blur and his janky ass games. I don't fuck with the fat Italian man who shouts oof when you touch a platform wrong.
I just prefer the funny plum guy with the spinny hair. Klonoa's also cool though, and Donkey Kong, but you know, Rayman's still my guy.
In the grand universe of child-friendly platformer games, Rayman 2 remains as a fantastically mystical experience that none of the other games in the series have really gone back to. A lot of the assets and characters were reused for Rayman Arena, a really fun multiplayer party game with the same style and art direction, also with great music. The sequel, creatively named Rayman 3, would take a different direction and tone from the previous game, instead of the more enjoyable slapstick humour of Rayman 2, but the music and presentation of Rayman 3 is still unique and beautiful in its own way. While doing my surface-level plagiarized research for this video, I found that Michel Ancel, the designer of Rayman, often described him as being a superhero. I found this odd at first, but then I remembered how selfless Rayman is portrayed in the story of The Great Escape. He's always the one helping others along the way, and they help you in return. The game may be goofy and wacky on the surface, but at its core, Rayman 2 has a lot of heart. You don't just kill the bad guy to save the princess. You go to great lengths to save your friends, help families reunite, set free the fairies, and protect the world from the devastating pollution of Razorbeard's army.
And that's why, out of all the 3D platformers I've played, Rayman 2 is still my favourite. Because I played it as a kid, so I have nostalgia for it. That's pretty much it.
Move over, Mario. What?